I'm Claire Bennett, 34, standing outside my brother Jason's military ceremony in my carefully concealed dress uniform. The security guard scanned his list again. "Sorry, ma'am, you're not here." I saw my family walk past, Jason smirking at my predicament. Just as security moved to escort me out, Commander Marshall appeared. "Is there a problem?" His voice boomed through the entrance. "Welcome, General Claire Bennett." My brother's jaw dropped. My parents froze. Their daughter, the desk job disappointment, was someone else entirely. If you're watching this from a military family, hit like and subscribe to see how I finally earned their respect after years of secret service. Growing up as Claire Bennett meant living in the shadow of military men. My father, William Bennett, retired as a colonel after 30 years of distinguished service. His uniform hung pristinely in our living room, medals catching the light each morning as I ate breakfast before school. The Bennett name carried weight on base. It meant discipline, honor, and an uncompromising dedication to country. My brother Jason was the natural heir to this legacy. 2 years younger than me, he nonetheless commanded the family attention from the moment he declared at age 8 that he would follow in Dad's footsteps. While I received nods for good grades, Jason's every push-up was celebrated. His decision to attend West Point was treated like a national holiday in our household. I loved my country just as deeply, but differently. While Jason dreamed of leading men into battle like our father, I was fascinated by intelligence operations, threat analysis, and the invisible chess game of national security. When I announced my intention to join military intelligence instead of the regular forces, Dad's disappointment was palpable. "Intelligence," he'd scoffed at dinner. "That's just desk work, Claire. Support staff. The real military is out there in the field." Mom had patted my hand. "It's probably for the best, honey. Women have it hard in combat roles anyway." Their perception of my career choice as somehow lesser never changed, even as I progressed through training. What they didn't understand, what I couldn't tell them due to classification protocols, was that my role would take me deeper into danger than most conventional soldiers ever experienced. As years passed, the divide grew. At family gatherings, Jason regaled everyone with sanitized versions of his deployments. Each story ended with Dad clapping him on the shoulder, pride radiating from his weathered face. Meanwhile, my work remained classified. When asked what I was doing, all I could offer were vague references to analysis and reports. "Still pushing papers?" Jason would ask, his tone making it clear he considered his service the real deal. Must be nice having weekends off while the rest of us are in the field. Little did he know I hadn't had a real weekend off in years. The operations I was coordinating ran continuously, and lives hung in the balance of decisions I made daily. But security clearance levels meant I carried these burdens alone. Mom's disappointment took a different form. At 34, I wasn't fulfilling her vision of what a daughter should be. "Melissa from down the street just had her second baby," she'd comment during our monthly calls. "And she still finds time to volunteer at church. Each family Christmas, Thanksgiving, or 4th of July barbecue became an exercise in restraint. I'd listen to Jason's combat stories, embellished for dramatic effect, while Dad nodded approvingly. I'd help Mom in the kitchen as she lamented my lack of a husband. My achievements, commendations I couldn't mention, operations I couldn't reference, lives I had saved, remained invisible. The distance between us grew incrementally with each passing year. I rose through the ranks quickly, my analytical skills and strategic thinking placing me on an accelerated path. By 30, I had attained a rank that would have astonished my family, but classification protocols meant I carried this achievement silently. Jason, meanwhile, made captain and considered himself the family success story. At holiday gatherings, he'd lecture me about real sacrifice and frontline service, unaware that I'd spent the previous week extracting assets from behind enemy lines or coordinating strikes that changed the course of conflicts. "You should come watch a training exercise sometime," he once offered condescendingly. "Might give you some perspective on what the military actually does beyond those computers you stare at." I had simply smiled and said maybe someday, swallowing the irony that I had personally authorized operations that had directly supported his unit multiple times. In fact, Intelligence I had gathered had once saved his entire platoon from an ambush, though he would never know it was his sister who had made the critical call. The final breaking point came 3 years ago when I missed Dad's retirement ceremony due to an overseas operation I was commanding. Jason had called me afterward, voice tight with disapproval. He's given his whole life to this country, and you couldn't even show up. What report was so important that you abandoned your family? I couldn't tell him I was coordinating the extraction of 3 critical assets from a hostile region. An operation that saved lives and secured intelligence that would protect countless American soldiers, including, potentially, him. Instead, I absorbed his disappointment, adding it to the growing pile of misunderstandings that defined our relationship. By the time Jason's commendation ceremony appeared on the horizon, we were essentially strangers who happened to share DNA and childhood memories. My achievements remained classified, my sacrifices invisible, and my family's perception of me frozen in time. Claire Bennett, the daughter who couldn't quite measure up to the Bennett military legacy. The invitation to Jason's commendation ceremony arrived via email, forwarded by Mom with a brief note. Jason's being honored for exceptional service. Family should be there. Dad's giving a speech. No request for RSVP, just the assumption I would attend as the supportive sister. Relegated to the background as the Bennett men took center stage once again. I stared at the formal invitation, embossed with the Army insignia. Captain Jason Bennett would receive the Silver Star for Valor during Operation Mountain Shield. The ceremony would take place at Fort Bragg, with full military honors. My brother had indeed served with distinction, leading his men through a dangerous extraction under heavy fire. I felt genuine pride in his accomplishment, complicated by the familiar sting of being perpetually overshadowed. That evening, as I contemplated whether to attend, my secure line rang. Few people had this number, and calls on it never brought casual conversation. General Bennett, Commander Marshall's voice was crisp and formal over the encrypted connection. Commander, I acknowledged, automatically sitting straighter though no one could see me. I understand your brother is being honored next month at Fort Bragg. I blinked in surprise. Yes, sir. How did you? I'll be presiding over the ceremony, he explained. But there's something you should know. The Joint Chiefs have authorized the declassification of Operation Shadowcast. Your role as Operation Commander will be publicly recognized. My heart skipped. Operation Shadowcast had been the most significant achievement of my career, a complex, multifaceted intelligence operation that had neutralized a major terrorist network without a single American casualty. But like everything else I'd accomplished, it had remained classified, recognized only by those with the highest security clearances. Sir, are you saying? We're awarding you the Distinguished Service Cross, General Bennett, at the same ceremony as your brother. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of my family dismissing my military contribution, they would witness my recognition at the very event intended to celebrate Jason. Your family doesn't know about this, do they? Commander Marshall asked, though he clearly knew the answer. Classification protocols, sir. They believe I work a desk job in intelligence analysis. His chuckle held understanding. Well, General, I believe they're in for quite a surprise. After hanging up, I sat in silence, contemplating the upcoming ceremony with a mix of vindication and apprehension. Part of me wanted to warn my family, to prepare them for the revelation. But another part, the part that had endured years of dismissal and condescension, wanted to see their unfiltered reaction. In the weeks leading up to the ceremony, I prepared methodically, as I did for any operation. I had my dress uniform pressed, each medal and insignia positioned precisely according to regulation. I would arrive separately from my family, maintaining the charade until Commander Marshall made the announcement. The morning of the ceremony dawned bright and clear. I drove to Fort Bragg alone, my stomach tight with anticipation. As I approached the security checkpoint, I deliberately kept my highest insignia covered by my jacket. The young security guard asked for identification, and I provided my standard military ID rather than my general's credentials. He checked his list. I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't see a Claire Bennett here. I'm Captain Bennett's sister, I explained. Family of the honoree. The guard checked again. I have William and Rachel Bennett and Stephanie Adams Bennett listed as family, but no Claire Bennett. My chest tightened. Either an administrative oversight or, more likely, Jason had simply not included me on the family list. Before I could respond, I spotted my family approaching the checkpoint. Dad in his formal retired colonel uniform, Mom elegantly dressed, Jason in full dress uniform with his wife Stephanie on his arm. The guard waved them through with a respectful "Congratulations, Captain Bennett." As they passed, Jason noticed me standing at the checkpoint. Rather than showing concern that his sister was being denied entry, he gave me that familiar smug look, the one that said I was once again failing to measure up to the Bennett standard. "Problem with your paperwork, Claire?" he called, not stopping to help. Typical desk job folks, always getting tangled in red tape. They continued inside while I remained at the checkpoint, the guard looking increasingly uncomfortable. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside, ma'am. We have other guests arriving." For a moment, I considered revealing my rank, producing my general's identification. But that would undermine Commander Marshall's plan for the ceremony. Instead, I stepped aside, a familiar sense of invisibility washing over me. Just as the guard was about to direct me to leave the premises, a black SUV pulled up. Commander Marshall stepped out, his 4-star insignia immediately causing the security team to straighten to attention. "General Bennett," he called, walking toward me with hand extended. "I was beginning to worry you wouldn't make it." The security guard's eyes widened. "General." Commander Marshall fixed him with a stern look. "Is there a problem with allowing General Bennett into her own commendation ceremony, Corporal?" "No, sir." "Sorry, sir." The guard stammered, quickly moving to open the gate. "My apologies, General. You weren't on my list." "An oversight, I'm sure," Commander Marshall said smoothly, offering me his arm. "Shall we, General? We have quite a surprised audience awaiting us inside." As we walked through the gates, I caught a glimpse of my family being seated in the front row, completely unaware that their perception of me was about to be permanently altered. The auditorium at Fort Bragg hummed with conversation as distinguished military personnel, government officials, and family members filed in. Commander Marshall escorted me not to the family section where my parents sat, but to the reserved VIP area in the front row, opposite the family seating. "Your seat, General Bennett," he said, loud enough for nearby officers to hear. Several high-ranking officials nodded respectfully in my direction, some coming over to shake my hand. "Outstanding work on Shadowcast, General," murmured a 3-star Air Force general. "Change the game in the region." From across the aisle, I felt Jason's confused stare. I could read his expression perfectly, the narrowed eyes, the slightly tilted head. He was trying to reconcile his desk job sister with the woman being treated with deference by some of the highest-ranking officers in the military. Dad leaned over to whisper something to him, probably asking what was happening. Mom simply looked bewildered, her social smile frozen in place as she watched officers twice her husband's rank treating me like a peer. The ceremony began with the traditional posting of colors and national anthem. As the official proceedings got underway, I found myself drifting back to specific moments of dismissal that had shaped our family dynamic. "Jason, at my college graduation, intelligence analysis? So, basically you'll be reading reports while real soldiers do the fighting. Dad, after my first promotion. That's nice, honey. Of course, advancement comes easier in support roles. Less competition. Mom, just last Christmas, it's such a shame your job keeps you so busy. You're missing your chance to start a family, you know. Biological clocks don't care about careers." Each memory stung afresh, but today they carried a new context. The dismissal had been based on incomplete information, unnecessary secrecy that had cost me my family's respect, but had served my country in ways they couldn't comprehend. The regional commander took the stage to begin the awards presentation. Minor commendations came first: Bronze Stars, Meritorious Service Medals, and commendation medals awarded to various service members for their contributions. Then came the moment for Jason's recognition. He rose confidently at the announcement of his name, striding to the stage with the assurance of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. "Captain Jason Bennett," announced the regional commander, "for extraordinary heroism while engaged in military operations against hostile forces, we award you the Silver Star." The citation detailed Jason's actions, leading his platoon through an intense firefight to extract endangered civilians, maintaining calm under pressure, and ensuring zero casualties among his men despite being wounded himself. It was genuinely impressive service, worthy of recognition. Jason accepted the medal with a practiced humility that nonetheless failed to completely mask his pride. He stepped to the microphone for his acceptance speech. "This honor belongs not just to me, but to the brave men who served under my command," he began. "Their courage and dedication made our mission possible." He thanked his commanding officers, his fellow soldiers, and then turned to personal acknowledgments. "I want to thank my father, retired Colonel William Bennett, whose example of service and sacrifice has guided my military career. Everything I am as a soldier, I learned from him." Dad beamed from the family section, chest puffed with pride. "To my mother, Rachel, whose strength as a military wife and mother taught me resilience." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "And to my wife, Stephanie, whose support never wavers, even during my longest deployments." His wife smiled adoringly from her seat beside my parents. I waited for my name, for some acknowledgement of his sister who had served alongside him, albeit in a different capacity. But Jason concluded his speech without a single mention of me. Not even the cursory, "and to my sister," that basic family courtesy might have demanded. It shouldn't have hurt after all these years of distance, but somehow the public omission cut deeper than our private estrangement ever had. Jason returned to his seat to enthusiastic applause, accepting congratulatory handshakes as he passed. He didn't look in my direction once. As the applause died down, Commander Marshall took the stage. His presence commanded immediate attention, the room falling into respectful silence. "Before we conclude today's ceremony," he said, his voice filling the auditorium, "we have one final and most important recognition to present." The audience straightened in their seats. A final award after the Silver Star suggested something of significant importance. Few among us serve in capacities where their greatest achievements must remain unknown, even to their families, Commander Marshall continued. Where years of sacrifice and extraordinary heroism go unrecognized due to the classified nature of their work. I felt my heart begin to race as Commander Marshall's gaze found me in the audience. Today, with the declassification of Operation Shadowcast, we have the rare privilege of publicly acknowledging one such individual. From the corner of my eye, I could see my family's confusion. This wasn't on the program they'd been given. "Ladies and gentlemen," Commander Marshall's voice rose with formal gravity, "it is my distinct honor to invite to the stage the commanding officer of Operation Shadowcast, the architect of one of the most successful counterterrorism operations in our nation's history." He paused, his eyes moving deliberately to my family. "General Claire Bennett." "Who's she?" I heard Jason whisper loudly to my father as I rose from my seat. The auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. Military personnel throughout the room immediately stood, creating a cascading standing ovation that rippled from the front rows to the back of the hall. These were people who understood exactly what Operation Shadowcast had entailed, the risks, the complexity, the lives saved. Only my family remained seated, frozen in shock, as I walked toward the stage. My steps were measured, deliberate, the walk of someone accustomed to command. I felt Jason's eyes following me, his expression cycling rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and something approaching horror as the reality of who I was began to sink in. Commander Marshall waited at center stage, holding a small case containing the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second highest military decoration, awarded for extreme gallantry and risk of life in combat operations. As I climbed the steps to stand beside him, the applause continued unabated. "General Claire Bennett," Commander Marshall began once the audience finally quieted, "has served her country with extraordinary distinction for 15 years, rising through the ranks to become the youngest woman ever to achieve the rank of Brigadier General in the United States Army." I stood at parade rest, my face composed despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. From this vantage point, I could see my family clearly, Dad's mouth slightly open, Mom clutching her purse with white knuckles. Jason's face flushed with color. For security reasons, much of General Bennett's service record remains classified, Commander Marshall continued. But today, we can acknowledge her role as the commanding officer of Operation Shadowcast, a complex counterterrorism initiative that successfully dismantled the al-Rashid network without a single American casualty. As Commander Marshall spoke, my mind flashed back to the reality behind those sanitized words. 3 years of meticulous intelligence gathering, sleepless nights coordinating assets across 11 countries. The constant weight of knowing that any miscalculation could cost not only the lives of my operatives, but potentially thousands of civilians. The isolation of command, magnified by the classification level that prevented me from sharing my burden with anyone outside the operation. General Bennett personally coordinated the extraction of key intelligence assets from hostile territory, often placing herself in direct danger to ensure mission success. What the commander couldn't say was that I had been on the ground for the most critical phase of the operation. When our primary asset was compromised, I had made the decision to go in myself rather than risk another operative who lacked my language fluency and regional knowledge. The scar on my left side, hidden beneath my uniform, was a permanent reminder of how close that extraction had come to failure. Her strategic planning and decisive leadership directly prevented 3 major terrorist attacks on American soil and saved an estimated 5,000 lives, both military and civilian. In the audience, my father's expression had transformed from shock to something more complex, a dawning recognition tinged with what looked like shame. Beside him, my mother had begun to cry silently, one hand covering her mouth. Jason simply stared, the color now drained from his face. For extraordinary heroism while engaged in military operations involving conflict with hostile forces, Commander Marshall's voice resonated through the hushed auditorium. The President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Distinguished Service Cross to Brigadier General Claire Bennett. He opened the case, revealing the distinctive medal, a bronze cross with an eagle at its center, suspended from a blue ribbon with red and white stripes. As he pinned it to my uniform, joining the rows of other decorations I had earned but rarely had the opportunity to wear, he spoke more quietly, just for me. Well-deserved and long overdue, General. I stepped to the microphone, aware that every eye in the room was on me, none more intense than those of my family. Thank you, Commander Marshall. My voice remained steady, professional. This honor recognizes not just my contribution, but the dedication and sacrifice of every intelligence officer, analyst, and operative who served under my command during Operation Shadowcast. Their courage and commitment, often undertaken in complete anonymity, exemplify the highest traditions of military service. I deliberately did not look at my family as I continued. In intelligence work, we understand that recognition is rarely public. Our greatest achievements remain classified, our contributions known only to a select few. We serve knowing that our names may never appear in history books, that our families may never fully understand the nature of our sacrifice. Now I allowed myself to meet Jason's gaze briefly. But we serve nonetheless, alongside our brothers and sisters in every branch of the military, united in our commitment to protect this nation and its people. The medal I received today belongs to all who serve, whether on the front lines or in the shadows. As I concluded my brief remarks, the audience rose once again in applause. This time, I noticed my father standing slowly, pulling my mother to her feet beside him. Jason remained seated, his expression unreadable. Commander Marshall returned to the microphone to formally conclude the ceremony, but my focus had narrowed to the inevitable confrontation that would follow. After years of dismissal and misunderstanding, my family was finally seeing me, not as they had imagined me, but as I truly was. Their world had just shifted dramatically, and I knew from experience that sudden paradigm shifts rarely occurred without resistance. As the ceremony ended and people began to file out of the auditorium, high-ranking officers approached to offer congratulations. Each handshake and commendation created a larger buffer between me and my family, delaying the inevitable moment when we would have to face each other with this new reality between us. Through the crowd, I could see Jason still seated, staring at the now empty stage while my parents stood awkwardly nearby, clearly unsure whether to approach me as I was surrounded by generals and officials. The public revelation was complete, but the real reckoning was yet to come. The reception following the ceremony was held in an adjacent hall, transformed by white linens and subtle military insignia into a space of dignified celebration. I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations from colleagues who understood the true significance of Operation Shadowcast, most of whom had never been able to acknowledge my role publicly until today. "Outstanding work, General Bennett," said the Army Chief of Staff, clasping my hand firmly. "The intelligence community has been singing your praises for years. About time the rest of us could join in." I thanked him, maintaining the professional composure expected of my rank while scanning the room for my family. I finally spotted them near the entrance, Dad looking uncomfortable in a way his military bearing couldn't quite conceal, Mom clutching her purse like a shield, and Jason, his face set in hard lines I recognized from childhood arguments. As I excused myself from a conversation with the Secretary of Defense, I saw my family finally moving in my direction. Jason led the way, his silver star newly pinned to his chest, his stride purposeful. I braced myself, knowing this confrontation had been building for years. "General Bennett," Jason said as he reached me, his voice loud enough to turn heads nearby. The formal address carried a bitter edge. "Or should I still call you Claire? I'm not sure I know who you are anymore." "Jason," I acknowledged, keeping my voice level. "Congratulations on your Silver Star. Your service was exemplary." "Don't do that," he hissed, stepping closer. "Don't talk to me like I'm just another officer. We grew up in the same house. You're my sister who apparently has been lying to me my entire adult life." Dad placed a restraining hand on Jason's shoulder. "Son, this isn't the place." "When would be the place, Dad?" Jason shrugged off the hand. "When she disappears again behind whatever classified curtain she's been hiding behind. When she goes back to pretending she's just pushing papers while secretly commanding operations." Mom stepped forward, her eyes red-rimmed. "Claire, how could you not tell us? We're your family." I took a deep breath, acutely aware of the attention we were beginning to draw. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private." "Why?" Jason challenged. "Secrecy seems to be your specialty. Why change now?" Before I could respond, Commander Marshall appeared at my side, his presence immediately altering the dynamic. "Captain Bennett," he addressed Jason with quiet authority, "I believe your sister suggested a private venue for family discussions." "That seems appropriate, doesn't it?" Jason straightened reflexively at the commander's tone. "Yes, sir." Commander Marshall gestured to a small conference room off the main hall. "You're welcome to use that space, General Bennett." I nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Commander." As my family followed me to the conference room, I could feel the tension radiating from Jason. Once inside with the door closed, he wasted no time. 15 years, Claire. 15 years of letting us think you were some mid-level analyst. Letting us believe you were just supporting real soldiers like me and Dad. His voice cracked slightly. "Do you have any idea how many times I talked down to you about your service? How many times I assumed I was doing something more important than you?" "I couldn't tell you, Jason. It wasn't personal. Everything I worked on was classified at the highest levels." "Bullshit," he spat. "You could have given us some idea. You let me believe I was the successful one. The one continuing the Bennett military tradition, while you were what? Running covert operations? Commanding intelligence missions? Becoming a general." Dad stepped forward, his expression a complex mixture of pride and confusion. "Claire, help us understand. All these years, we thought. You thought I couldn't measure up," I finished for him, the words emerging more sharply than I'd intended. "You both made that perfectly clear from the moment I chose intelligence over infantry." "That's not fair," Mom protested weakly. "Isn't it?" I looked at each of them in turn. "Dad, you called my work just desk duty when I told you my assignment." "Jason, you've spent years making condescending remarks about me pushing papers while real soldiers did the fighting." "Mom, you've treated my career as an unfortunate phase delaying my real purpose of marriage and children." The stark truth hung in the air between us. "We didn't know," Dad said finally. "You didn't need to know the classified details to respect my choice of service," I replied. "You assumed that because I wasn't in combat roles like the Bennett men, my contribution was somehow lesser." Jason paced the small room, his silver star catching the light with each turn. "So, all those times I was telling you about my deployments, my promotions, You were what? Silently outranking me? Commanding operations that probably dwarfed anything I was involved in. That's not how I thought about it, Jason. Then how did you think about it? He demanded. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were content to let your family believe a lie while you built some secret career we knew nothing about. I followed classification protocols, I said, my military discipline keeping my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. Every operation I led, every mission I commanded, was subject to the highest security clearance. Discussing my work, even in general terms, could have compromised national security and put lives at risk. We're your family. Jason's voice rose again. Not some security breach waiting to happen. Operational security doesn't make exceptions for family, I countered. You know that, Jason. Or would you have violated protocols to tell Mom and Dad details about your classified missions? He fell silent, knowing I was right. Dad sank heavily into one of the conference room chairs. All these years, we thought you were stuck in some administrative position. I even pulled strings, tried to get you transferred to more prestigious posts. The irony of that statement might have been amusing under different circumstances. My father, the retired colonel, believing his daughter needed his help to advance in her career when she had already surpassed his final rank. I appreciate the intention, Dad, even if it wasn't necessary. Mom wiped at her eyes. But why let us believe you were less than you are? You could have at least told us your rank, your promotions. Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. Or would you still have seen me as choosing the wrong path? The path that wasn't really military service in your eyes. My question struck home. The uncomfortable silence that followed confirmed what I had always suspected, that even knowing my rank, they would have considered intelligence work somehow lesser than the direct combat roles the Bennett men had traditionally chosen. Jason broke the silence, his voice lower but still tense. You let me make a fool of myself. All those times I lectured you about real service. You could have said something, anything, and what would that have accomplished, Jason? Would you have suddenly respected intelligence work if you knew I outranked you? Or would you have resented me for it? He had no answer, which was answer enough. I made peace with your perception of me years ago, I continued. I served knowing that the recognition I really valued would never come from my family. I found other measures of success, other sources of validation. So why even come today? Jason challenged. If you'd made peace with our ignorance, why allow this public revelation? I looked him directly in the eyes. Because Operation Shadowcast being declassified was beyond my control. And once I knew it would be acknowledged at your ceremony, I had a choice. Avoid the event entirely or be present for the inevitable moment when you learn the truth. And you chose the public humiliation option, he said bitterly. I chose to finally be seen for who I actually am, I corrected him. After 15 years of hiding in plain sight, I chose to stop diminishing myself to protect your ego. The bluntness of my statement left him momentarily speechless. Dad rose from his chair, approaching me with an uncertainty I'd never seen in him before. Claire, I don't know what to say. I'm proud of your accomplishments, of course I am. But I'm ashamed that you felt you couldn't share even the parts that weren't classified. That I made you feel your service was somehow less valuable. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from my father, a man whose military bearing rarely allowed for admission of error. Thank you, Dad, I said simply. Mom joined him, reaching for my hand. All this time, we thought we knew our daughter. But you've been carrying so much we knew nothing about. Jason remained apart, struggling visibly with the complete reordering of his understanding of our relationship. I just need to know one thing, he said finally. All these years, when I was talking down to you about your service, were you laughing at me behind my back? The question revealed the heart of his distress, not just that I had outranked and outachieved him, but that I might have secretly mocked his ignorance. No, Jason, I answered truthfully. I was just doing my job and letting you do yours. Your accomplishments are still your accomplishments. My rank doesn't diminish what you've achieved. He nodded slowly, not fully appeased, but at least considering my words. A knock at the door interrupted the tense family tableau. Commander Marshall peered in. Excuse the interruption, but the Secretary of Defense is asking to speak with General Bennett before he departs. Thank you, Commander. I'll be right there. I responded, grateful for the momentary reprieve from the emotional intensity of the confrontation. As I moved toward the door, Jason's voice stopped me. This conversation isn't over, Claire. I turned back to face my family, my father struggling to reconcile his daughter with the general now before him, my mother trying to process 15 years of misconceptions, and my brother grappling with the uncomfortable realization that the sister he had patronized was actually his superior officer. No, I agreed quietly. It's just beginning. I rejoined the reception, seamlessly transitioning from the raw emotion of the family confrontation to the professional composure expected of my rank. The Secretary of Defense was complimentary about Operation Shadowcast, making a point to mention my innovative approach to cross-agency coordination, diplomatic language for how I'd managed to get traditionally competitive intelligence branches to work together. Throughout the conversation, I maintained focus, despite being acutely aware of my family's re-entry into the main reception area. Jason made directly for the bar, while my parents stood awkwardly near the periphery, clearly unsure of their place in this unfamiliar version of their daughter's world. After concluding my conversation with the secretary, I was immediately approached by several other officials. Each interaction reinforced the disconnect between my professional reality and my family's perception of me. These high-ranking officers and officials treated me with the deference due my rank and accomplishments, while my family watched from a distance, strangers to this aspect of my life. I excused myself from a conversation with the NATO intelligence liaison to get a glass of water, finding myself momentarily alone. The brief respite ended when Jason appeared beside me, drink in hand, his expression tightly controlled. "Your admirers seem very impressed with you, General," he said, the formality still carrying that edge of bitterness. "Jason, this isn't the place to continue our discussion." "No? Seems like the perfect place to me. All these people who apparently know my sister better than her own family does." His voice had risen slightly, drawing glances from nearby guests. I recognized the warning signs from our childhood. Jason had always processed hurt through anger. And when that anger reached a certain point, his volume control became unreliable. "Let's step outside," I suggested quietly. "Why? Afraid I'll embarrass you in front of your important friends?" His words were beginning to slur slightly. The great General Bennett, too important for her family to know what she really does. Commander Marshall materialized beside us, his timing impeccable. "Everything all right here?" "Fine, sir," I responded automatically. Jason laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Oh, everything's just perfect, Commander. Just having a chat with my sister about family loyalty. Or lack thereof." Commander Marshall's expression remained neutral, but his eyes assessed the situation with the precision I'd come to expect from him. "Captain Bennett, perhaps you'd like to get some air. The garden outside is quite pleasant this time of evening." It wasn't a suggestion. Jason recognized the tone of command and bristled, but complied, setting down his half-empty glass and stalking toward the side exit. Commander Marshall gave me a slight nod, and I followed, aware that he had just deftly prevented a potentially embarrassing public scene. The garden was small but well-maintained, with stone benches positioned along a central path. Dad and Mom had apparently seen us leave and followed, creating an unintended family reunion beneath the waning daylight. "Go ahead, Claire," Jason said as soon as the door closed behind us. "Explain to us why you let your family believe a lie for 15 years. "It wasn't a lie," I said, maintaining my composure despite his provocative tone. "It was operational security. Everything I worked on was classified. I couldn't discuss my actual role, my missions, or even my rank in most cases." "Bullshit." Jason's control finally snapped. "You could have told us something. Anything other than letting us think you were some minor analyst while you were actually commanding operations." "Jason," Dad stepped forward, his hand on my brother's shoulder. "Lower your voice." "Son, why should I?" Jason shrugged off the hand. "She let you think she was a disappointment, Dad. She let us all believe she couldn't measure up to the Bennett name, when all along she was becoming a goddamn general." The raw hurt in his voice cut through my professional detachment. This wasn't just about his pride. It was about feeling deceived by someone he trusted. "I followed the protocols I was bound by," I said more gently. "But you're right that I could have pushed back more when you diminished my service. I could have corrected you when you assumed intelligence work was just pushing papers." "Then why didn't you?" Mom asked, genuine confusion in her voice. The question hung in the air, forcing me to confront a truth I had avoided acknowledging even to myself. It wasn't just about classification protocols. Something deeper had kept me silent all these years. Because after a while, it was easier, I admitted finally. It was easier to let you believe what you wanted about me than to constantly defend the value of what I did. Every time I came home, I had to listen to stories about the real military, Dad's combat experience, Jason's deployments, while my work was dismissed as support staff at best. I looked at each of them in turn. Do you know what it's like to coordinate an operation that saves hundreds of lives, then come home for Christmas and be asked when you're going to get a more meaningful position? To be told that your brother's work matters more because he carries a rifle instead of gathering the intelligence that keeps him alive? The stark truth of my words seemed to hit my father particularly hard. He sank onto one of the stone benches, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. I never realized. He began. Then stopped, uncharacteristically at a loss for words. No, you didn't, I agreed. None of you did. And after a while, I stopped expecting you to. I found validation elsewhere, from my team. My superiors, the operations we successfully completed. Jason's anger had begun to deflate, replaced by something more complex. All those times I talked down to you about your service. Yes, I said simply. Jesus, Claire. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from our childhood whenever he realized he'd gone too far in a sibling argument. I've been an absolute ass. Haven't I? The blunt self-assessment surprised a small laugh out of me. At times, Mom approached cautiously, as if seeing me for the first time. I don't understand why you couldn't at least tell me. Mother to daughter, not for publication. Mom, you tell everyone everything, I said gently. Remember when Dad was considering retiring and mentioned it to you in confidence? The entire Officers' Wives Association knew by lunchtime the next day. She had the grace to look embarrassed. I'm not that bad. You really are, Dad and Jason said simultaneously, creating an unexpected moment of levity. The tension in the garden eased slightly as Mom huffed in mock offense. Commander Marshall appeared at the garden entrance. General Bennett, I apologize for the interruption, but there's a secure call for you. I nodded acknowledgement. I'll be right there. As the commander withdrew, my family looked at me with new awareness of the responsibilities I carried. You have to go, Dad said. Not a question, but a recognition. I do. But this conversation isn't over. I echoed Jason's earlier words. If you're willing, I'd like to try again. Not as the family you thought I was, but as the person I actually am. Jason stepped forward, military training evident in his straightened posture. I owe you an apology, Claire. Many apologies, actually. We all do, Dad added, rising from the bench. I'd like a chance to get to know my daughter, Mom said softly. The real one, not the version we imagined. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine connection with my family, not based on their expectations or assumptions, but on the beginning of true understanding. I'd like that too, I said simply. As I turned to follow Commander Marshall, Jason called after me. General Bennett? I looked back, surprised by the formal address. He offered a proper military salute, perfect in its execution. It's an honor to serve in the same military as you, ma'am. I returned the salute, military precision masking the emotion that threatened to overwhelm my composure. The honor is mutual. Captain Bennett. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, nor complete reconciliation. But it was acknowledgement, a recognition of worth that I had stopped expecting from my family years ago. As I walked back into the reception to take the secure call, I realized that the weight I carried wasn't just classified information, but the burden of being unseen by those who should have known me best. For the first time in 15 years, that burden felt lighter. 6 months after the ceremony that changed everything, I sat in my parents' living room, watching as Dad carefully arranged a new display on the wall that had once showcased only his and Jason's military accomplishments. Now, my Distinguished Service Cross and a photo of me receiving it from Commander Marshall held a central position. Too centered? Dad asked, stepping back to assess his handiwork. It looks perfect. William, Mom answered before I could, bringing in a tray of coffee. Our family's service, properly represented at last. The past 6 months had been a period of cautious rebuilding. After the initial shock and confrontation at the ceremony, we had all needed time to adjust to our new reality. Jason had returned to his post, carrying both his silver star and a humbling recognition of how he had treated me over the years. My parents had embarked on what Mom called getting to know our actual daughter, a process that involved asking questions they had never thought to ask before and, more importantly, listening to the answers. For my part, I was learning to share what I could about my work without compromising security. Operation Shadowcast's declassification had opened the door to discussions that had previously been impossible, allowing me to fill in at least some of the blanks in my family's understanding of my career. The decorator suggested we group all the medals together, Mom said, settling beside me on the couch. But I told her absolutely not. Each of you earned those honors individually. They deserve their own space. This was new territory for Rachel Bennett, treating my accomplishments with the same reverence as those of the men in the family. The change hadn't happened overnight, and occasionally she still slipped into old patterns, asking about my dating life with more enthusiasm than my recent operation in Eastern Europe. But she was trying, and that effort meant more than she knew. Jason arrived shortly after, his wife Stephanie beside him. Their dynamic had shifted too. She had been almost comically horrified to discover she had been condescending to a brigadier general at family gatherings, asking if I enjoyed my little office job while she supported Jason's real military career. General Bennett, Jason greeted me with the half-serious, half-teasing salute that had become our new normal. Captain, I returned with equal measures of formality and warmth. Stephanie hugged me, whispering, I'm still mortified about all those times I tried to set you up with my cousin because I thought you needed something more fulfilling than your job. I laughed, genuinely amused rather than hurt by the memory. To be fair, your cousin is a doctor. He would have been quite a catch. Yes, but he talks exclusively about golf. You would have been bored senseless in the first 10 minutes. This easy banter was new, a relationship built on who I actually was rather than who they had assumed me to be. Dad called us to the dining room, where he had prepared his specialty, steaks grilled to perfection, a skill honed through countless military-base barbecues. As we settled around the table, I noticed subtle changes in our family configuration. Where once Jason had been positioned as the center of attention, now we were arranged as equals, different branches of service, different ranks, but equal in contribution and worthy of similar respect. I spoke with Commander Marshall yesterday, Dad mentioned as he served the food. He said the expansion of your intelligence division has been approved. This was another change, my father taking genuine interest in my career, seeking updates through his military connections about the parts of my work that weren't classified. It has, I confirmed. We're incorporating new cybersecurity protocols that should enhance our field operations considerably. Claire's team developed the framework that's being adopted across all intelligence branches. Jason added, a note of pride in his voice that would have been unimaginable 7 months earlier. Mom raised her glass to the Bennett family tradition of service, in all its forms. We clinked glasses, the simple toast acknowledging a broader definition of military contribution than had previously been recognized in this household. After dinner, Jason and I found ourselves alone on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The silence between us was comfortable now, lacking the tension that had characterized our interactions for so many years. I've been thinking a lot about perception, he said finally. About how I saw you versus who you actually were. And? I prompted when he paused, and I realized something pretty uncomfortable. He turned to face me directly. My dismissal of your service wasn't really about what you did. It was about maintaining my position in the family. If I acknowledged that intelligence work was just as valuable as combat roles, then I'd lose my special status as the one continuing Dad's legacy. The self-awareness surprised me. That's remarkably insightful, Jason. He laughed. Therapy, Stephanie insisted after the ceremony. Said I had unexamined assumptions about gender roles in military service. Smart woman, your wife. Yeah. He looked back at the sunset. She also pointed out that I never once considered that you might have chosen intelligence work because you were actually better suited for it than infantry. That maybe your talents lay in strategy and analysis rather than direct combat, and that following Dad's exact path would have been the wrong choice for you. I had never expected this level of reflection from my brother, who had always seemed so certain of his place in the world and mine. She's right, I acknowledged. I joined intelligence because that's where I could contribute most effectively. It wasn't about avoiding combat or taking an easier path. It was about using my specific abilities to serve in the most impactful way possible. I get that now. He shook his head ruefully. Only took a public revelation of your actual rank and a Distinguished Service Cross to open my eyes. We laughed together, the sound carrying into the gathering dusk. Inside, I could see Mom showing Stephanie old family photos, likely embarrassing ones of Jason and me as children. Dad was pouring after-dinner drinks, his movements precise and measured as always. This was my family, flawed, sometimes frustrating, but finally beginning to see me clearly. The road to this moment had been long and often painful. For years, I had carried the double burden of my classified work and my family's dismissal of its value. I had learned to find validation in my accomplishments rather than their recognition, to measure my worth by standards they couldn't see or understand. That separation had come at a cost, a distance that couldn't be bridged while so much of my life remained hidden. But it had also taught me something invaluable about identity and self-worth that I might never have learned otherwise. You know what's strange? I said to Jason. In some ways, I'm grateful for those years when you all underestimated me. He looked at me skeptically. Seriously? They taught me to define myself by my own standards, not by anyone else's perception. When external validation wasn't available, I had to find it internally. That's a powerful thing to learn. Still sounds like we were just being jerks, Jason said bluntly. I laughed. Oh, you definitely were. But it forced me to become more self-reliant, more certain of my choices, even when they weren't understood or valued by the people whose opinion I cared about most. Jason considered this. I'm not sure I could have done that, pursued a path that my family actively devalued. I needed Dad's approval too much. We're different that way, I acknowledged. Always have been. We fell silent again, watching as the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving behind a sky transitioning from fiery orange to deepening blue. Claire? Jason's voice was quieter now. I'm really proud to be your brother. The simple statement carried the weight of years of misunderstanding, finally cleared away. I'm proud to be your sister, I replied, meaning it completely. As darkness settled fully around us, we rejoined the family inside. The conversation flowed more easily than it ever had, moving between military topics, family memories, and future plans with a new balance that included my perspective as naturally as those of Dad and Jason. Later that night, without the declassification of Operation Shadowcast, I might have continued indefinitely in the strange dual existence I had maintained for 15 years, General Bennett in my professional life, disappointing daughter and sister in my personal one. The lesson wasn't simply about being recognized for my accomplishments, though that validation from my family was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. The deeper understanding was about authenticity, the power of being fully seen and accepted for who you actually are, not who others assume or wish you to be. For years, I had told myself that my family's perception didn't matter, that I had moved beyond needing their understanding or approval. But the relief and wholeness I felt now that those barriers had fallen revealed the cost of that separation. We need to be known, truly known, by those we love. Not necessarily in every detail. Some aspects of my work would always remain classified, but in our essential nature, our true value. I had learned to define my worth independently of external validation, a valuable skill that had carried me through years of unacknowledged service. But there was also profound peace in finally bringing those separate worlds together, in being General Claire Bennett to my family as well as my colleagues, in having my whole self recognized rather than just the parts one could safely reveal. As I pulled into my parking space, my phone chimed with a text from Mom. So wonderful to have all my children's accomplishments to brag about at the officers' wives' luncheon tomorrow. Love you, General Daughter. Red heart. I smiled, typing back. Just don't reveal any state secrets, Mom. Some things are still classified. Her response came immediately. I'll only tell them you're the most brilliant intelligence officer in the Army. That's just fact, not classified. See you Sunday. Dad's grilling again. The simple exchange warmed me in a way that my numerous commendations never had. Not because my mother's approval meant more than professional recognition, but because it represented the integration of my complete self, the personal and professional, The visible and hidden aspects of my identity finally aligned. The journey hadn't been easy. Years of feeling diminished and misunderstood had left marks that wouldn't disappear overnight. But as I unlocked my door, I felt lighter than I had in years, freed from the burden of compartmentalizing my life so completely. The greatest battles we fight aren't always the ones that earn medals. Sometimes they're the internal struggles to remain true to ourselves even when those closest to us don't understand or value our chosen path. I had won that battle long before the ceremony that revealed my rank to my family, not by convincing them of my worth, but by remaining certain of it despite their perception. That was perhaps the most valuable lesson of all, that true strength comes not from external validation, but from an unshakable inner knowledge of who you are and the value of what you contribute. The recognition is welcome when it comes, but it isn't what defines you. I am General Claire Bennett, daughter, sister, intelligence officer, leader. All of these identities are now integrated into a whole that my family finally sees and acknowledges. But I was always all of these things, even when the recognition wasn't there. The medal on my wall celebrates what I've accomplished, but the peace I feel comes from knowing I would have accomplished it regardless of whether anyone ever knew. Have you ever had to keep part of yourself hidden from those closest to you? Whether for professional reasons like mine or personal ones. How did you maintain your sense of self-worth when important aspects of your identity went unrecognized? Share your experiences in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might find strength in it. Remember, your value exists independently of others' perception of it, but there's a special kind of healing that comes when the world finally sees you as you truly are.